Today's conversation invites us to pause, take a breath, and wonder, what if the story we've been living isn't the story we have to keep? We're exploring the leap from greatness to genius, the power of listening inward, and what happens when we stop living from fear and start living from internal resonance. Because sometimes the most powerful shift begins with a single question we've never thought to ask ourselves. Enjoy the show. Welcome to Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan. I'm Dan Peters, psychologist and leadership coach. This show is all about bringing hope, connection, awareness, and wisdom through meaningful conversations that inspire us to be better versions of ourselves and have a positive impact on humanity. This is your space to pause, reflect, and reconnect with who you are, what you care about, and who you want to be. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. Today, I am speaking with Courtney Smith. Courtney is a coach and group facilitator who works with Fortune 500 companies and high-profile individuals to achieve change. She's a renowned practitioner of the Enneagram personality system, which she teaches alongside her other methods in her integrated approach to personality development. Courtney is also the co-author with Elise Loehnen of Choosing Wholeness Over Goodness, a process for reclaiming your full self. Prior to all of this, after graduating Yale Law School, Courtney began as a consultant at McKinsey & Company, where she advised organizations on strategic initiatives and led large-scale consolidation projects in healthcare and nonprofit industries for more than a decade. Having lived in New York City for 20 years, she now resides with her family in Santa Barbara. Courtney, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dan. I'm happy to be here.
I've been looking forward to this for a while. I have known of you and your work for some time, even before the workbook came out, listening to you on Elise's show and the conversations that you've had about the Enneagram and many other things. And then Elise has been on the show talking about her book when it came out. And then, of course, the workbook, singing you praises about the magic that you brought and the synergy that you both have together. So very excited to dive into the work with you.
I'm excited to be with someone who cares as much as I do about this stuff, and your listeners as well.
So before we dive in, I'm interested a little bit about your journey. Your journey to, I know that you have a very analytical brain, math, science, and then eventually law and consulting. And so I'm interested in what you care to share about your transformation as you went through the systems of education and thinking and then school and consultancy on your way to becoming a coach and the Enneagram that drives personal and organizational transformation.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I love so much what I do. I feel like I am in my purpose most of the time, which is a really, really delicious feeling. And if you'd told my 20-year-old self or 25 or 35-year-old self that this is what you were going to be doing, there's just no way I would have believed you. Um, And so it is true that my professional background is one of math, law, and then strategic consulting. And I'm so happy that I have that as my background because it does mean that I bring a high degree of skepticism, really, to any new system or any new way of being or making sense of the world. And so, um, yeah, I love the journey that I've been on, and I love that it began with that way of being. Um, and there is a healthy amount of skepticism that I bring to almost anything that I do. At the same time, part of my journey is um, after I've been doing work as a consultant for many, many years, when my husband and I decided to have a family, I did take time off. And um, that was, for me, not the right choice.
Mm,
And, the fact that I made that choice was in part informed by I could do consulting, I could do math, I could do the law, I could be very analytical, but there was a part of me that was profoundly unsatisfied with that as the sole way of being in this world. And so part of my decision to leave the workforce was about being good at that stuff, but at the same time, not feeling totally on purpose and totally alive while
mhm,
I was doing that work. And not knowing anything else to do, I just stepped out of the workforce. And then that also proved to be not a great fit for me. I love being a parent, but I also love being a parent that has a lot of other gifts and energy that is bigger than just having a family.
mhm,
And so when I came to terms with, hey, I've left the workforce, I don't know what I want to do, but I do want to do something. That really, because of that moment of personal crisis, opened me to a bunch of other tools that I would not have traditionally looked at,
mhm,
because they didn't meet that standard of, rigor, or like they don't work. They can't be modeled on a spreadsheet. And so I began looking at the Enneagram. I began looking at tools from Conscious Leadership Group. I began really getting my hands on anything that would help me explain the choices that I had made
mm.
and help guide me to making better choices going forward. And the the personal experience that I had with these tools, even though they didn't meet kind of the traditional empirical validity and like proof that I had been taught to use as my standard for what was something that was smart or intelligent, because it personally resonated for me in my own life. That personal experience was enough to overwhelm,
Mhm,
and say, actually, there might be something here.
mm.
And that really sort of led me on a journey back into the workforce, but with a much broader toolkit and a much broader understanding of what really help human beings be our fullest and best potential, best versions of ourselves. And so,
Beautiful.
yeah,
And
here I
here you are.
Here I am.
There's some leaps in here, and all these things are going through my head, like the big leap. I know um, Katie Hendricks is one of the teachers and people that you quote, and made me think of Gay Hendricks' work, where you're basically you left your zone of greatness, um, knowing there was more. Maybe not knowing it was, seeking in his terms that zone of genius, which you have certainly found. But you
Mm.
you took this leap, like, and for everyone, this idea of the zone of greatness is that the things that you're really good at and that you can do all day long and make an income at, and even have some meaning and purpose, but there's this feeling that there's more for you, like it's that calling inside, or that itch that you can't scratch. So that is one leap. And I think that second leap, which is so um, is profound, is the idea of going to the empirical, to what some will say with the Enneagram, even to that more spiritual, which, of course, has several connotations, right? The Just because we can't prove it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So that was another big leap that completely expanded you and has expanded your work.
Yeah. I really am just having a lot of appreciation for you bringing those concepts in right now. I mean, I think for me, making that leap from the zone of greatness to the zone of genius, one of the big things that I had to do, and this is part of the difference between a zone of greatness and a zone of genius, zones of greatness, you will get feedback that you're amazing at it.
Hmm.
You will get asked to do that work over and over and over again because you are really, really good at it. What distinguishes a zone of greatness activity from a zone of genius activity, though, is how does it make you feel inside at the same time? Not to discount the external feedback that you're getting, because that's important, but just as important is what is your internal experience of yourself when you're performing? Do you feel lit up? And So part of my kind of arc of development to go from zone of greatness to zone of genius was to even begin to have an internal compass and to understand that I had been overriding that, not paying attention to it. I had been like on an approval racket rather than a internal resonance uh,
Mhm.
journey. And so once I got really clear about how much I hadn't been listening to myself inside and the cost of that. And that cost was broad in many ways because I had stepped out of the workforce. But once I got used to listening to that compass, that transition from zone of greatness to zone of genius became something that happened really organically because I was just listening to myself for the first time, really.
I love the idea of internal resonance. Um, and that tuning in, and for so many of us, right, we're trained and we know the work and Elise's work on our best behavior, which is um, really focused on women, and yet we all are subject to all of the programming. So I just want to make it specific and generalize it, right? That the programming of how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to act, what we get, depending on our family and our society and where we are in the world, um, what we get our approval for, the shoulds and the should nots, and I know from my own journey, being very achievement oriented for a very long time, and a perfectionist in recovery, I could say that I don't know exactly when it happened, but when it did happen, the awareness of that, there's like a paradox that came out of it. On the one hand, it was completely freeing to know that I actually have choice and that I am of more value than what I produce and what I achieve. And on the other side, it's also very uncomfortable and anxiety provoking because it's like, well, now what? What's my marker? Like, wait, so it's at the same time both of these things start to occur before we move to the other side. So you mentioned, I think you said a little like personal crisis. It's like I'm guessing you also had your that difficult period in the in between, in the middle, which is typical.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, On Our Best Behavior by Elise is such a beautiful book, and it is about the performance of gender, right? And looking at these different dimensions. She uses the seven deadly sins as a construct to look at how women perform gender through their relationship to lust, gluttony, anger, pride, envy, et cetera, et cetera. And on the one hand, you can read that book through the lens of this is a book written for women about the performance of femininity. But the larger point is that all human beings are one of the things we do is we like to figure out who we are. We like to have a sense of self. And for most of us, gender is a part of that. And so part of the arc for every human being, male or female, as part of the reckoning with like who I am, I start typically with external messages of what a man or a woman is supposed to be. And on the one hand, that gives me a very strong path that I don't have to think that much about in terms of right or wrong, good or bad. I just have to take it in and I can follow it. And then, as we're describing in my own journey, and what I think happens for a lot of people, is little noises start to happen inside ourselves that this externally laid path is costing us, is not internally congruent, that there's parts of ourselves that we're having to shut down in order to continue with, to be loyal to these external messages or this external definition of what a man or woman should be. And there is, I think, for a lot of people, this moment of crisis of like, wow, this is costing me. But now I got to figure out one upside to using external definitions of gender to help you make choices is you don't have to think about it. You don't have to live in the unknown. You don't have to live in the discovery. You don't have to live in the mistake of like, well, I thought it was this and now it's that, or I was listening this way and then I tried it and it didn't work, or all of those questions, like that's one of the benefits of using external conditioning to guide us, is that it allows us to not sit in uncertainty.
Mhm. Yes. And most of us do not like, the human condition does not like uncertainty.
Right. And I really want to talk about that because we talk so much about growth and development, and I think there is so much upside to it. Obviously, this is my life. This is what I do, and at the same time, I really want to honor that that path is slow for us at moments in our life, because if we go down the path of I'm going to just keep listening to myself, what wants to happen, what's the next part of me that wants to unfold, there are going to be many, many moments where I'm asked to sit in, I don't know.
Hmm.
And I don't know what's going to happen if I make this choice. And that's profoundly uncomfortable. And so, as much as I want to advocate for people changing and growing and developing, I also want to honor that it's really scary. And so it can feel really scary because you're sitting in the unknown more often.
Yes. I was talking with a client yesterday, professor on sabbatical, first 6 month sabbatical after like the sabbatical got moved out for a variety of reasons. So well into his career, and he's had the 6 months to reflect. And he's had a lot of different life transitions along the way. And he said, one of the things that came to me, whether it was basically across all domains of my life, professional and personal, was how much I determined what happens to me based on how deliberate or not deliberate I was with my choices. And he said it was just this revelation for him that by choosing to do A or B, or not choosing, which is also choosing, it changes the micro moments of his life and the larger arc of his life. And um, I know you talk about this empowerment, and we'll talk about stories, which is like you are the author of your story. Like that's how we take the power back. Well, first of all, we'll talk about like recognizing we have stories, but
Mm,
ultimately, how do we are the authors of our stories, and we can, his words, be deliberate. Your words are a little different, but how do we choose instead of letting it all happen to us unknowingly,
mhm,
unwittingly?
mhm. Yeah, and the responsibility and accountability that comes with that, which is, when I allow myself to be guided by external norms, conditions, circumstances, events, on the one hand, I can feel unhappy, but on the other hand, I get to blame someone else for it, right? And we like that as human beings, to be able to blame other people for being unhappy. And what I hear a little bit in what the professor, your client, is saying is, when I reclaim the power or the authority of intentional, like I chose this, I chose this. There is there's a responsibility I'm taking in that, which is the life I'm creating at the end of the day is my life. It's nobody else's.
Hmm.
And so, I do maybe then have to have hard conversations with myself about where I was unintentional, or where I was intentional, but I was a little dirty. I wasn't clean about what was really going on. I was scared. All these things that we do. But I am gonna, I am going to take responsibility that it's my life.
Hmm. I was going to go straight to the stories, which there's so much good stuff to talk about stories. But before, something just occurred to me to hit first, which is, and it relates to your work with the Enneagram, which is like in the workbook, we're looking at how our relationship is, we're trying to uncover how our relationship is with each sin in a way that we can change the relationship with that sin, which is really based on, again, cultural programming, right? The context in which we're living. None of that goes away. Like, we still live in the same culture, society, family. Similarly, with the Enneagram, our type doesn't change mostly. I know that, right? It mostly doesn't change when we're born with
Mhm.
it. And what we're doing is we're trying to change our relationship with our type with this new awareness.
Mhm.
So say a little bit. I love how those, or maybe I'm weaving them together. You might say they don't weave together as much, but that's what came to me when I was thinking about both concepts and the work that you do.
Yeah. So just to take a step back, and I can speak for a minute about the workbook, speak for a minute about the Enneagram, and then speak for like how I sort of think about them conjoining or being similar. Um, the the workbook is about when we decide to conduct our lives in congruence or in conformity with gender norms, we're getting a payoff from that. And the payoff is that we usually feel some temporary degree of safety in terms of a sense of belonging, or we get to keep a relationship, or we get to have a strong sense of self. We feel very feminine. We feel very masculine. Um, we are performing gender, or we're conducting ourselves um, in ways that were dictated from our culture, and we get a payoff from that, which is it keeps us safe. And the workbook is about, but there is a cost to that, which is then we lose relationship to who we really are in this now moment. And the workbook offers a series of tools then for how you reorient to figuring out who you really are in the now moment, and what would it be like to let your life be guided by that rather than external conditions or external norms. The Enneagram is very similar in that the Enneagram is a system that talks about 9 different personalities, or 9 different ways of being in the world that that you have an orientation to, and we pick one of those 9 ways of being in the world ultimately to keep us safe, ultimately to help us get our needs met. And then what happens is we end up conducting ourselves in a way that's the dictate of type rather than what's internally arising inside me in this now moment. And it might be that, you know, for example, I'm a type 6, I'm a what's called a loyal skeptic. Over here, I have really learned to be loyal to the people I love and the systems and traditions that I care about. And that's really helped me get my needs met in many, many ways. But if I am always loyal under any circumstance, there's a cost to that, which
Hmm.
is I have to deny that sometimes loyalty may not serve me. And so the tools that are in the workbook also can be used and applied to someone who's working with the Enneagram, because the Enneagram is about what are the strictures, like what are the constraints of my type that initially helped serve me to get my needs met, but now are inherently limiting me in terms of my full range of motion, in terms of how I want to show up, and in terms of asking the question, who am I really in this now moment? And can I trust that to lead me rather than a rigid box that I've put myself in?
Yes. And when I think of your strong 5, your quiet specialist, I think of you back with math, and I think of you with law, and I think of you with your years of consulting, right? Like diving into the data and the right that and that's why this your transformation is so profound, as I said, going towards Enneagram and towards the more less tangible, so to speak. I am a 2, the helper, with very strong 1 and 3, perfectionist and achiever. And so I could say in my version of that, yeah, being a helper has served me a lot in my life. And there became a time when that had to be looked at strongly. Um, so back and they really correspond with our zones of greatness, right? Too,
Yes.
but
Yes.
they keep us from genius if we
Yes.
stay in those boxes.
Yeah. Yeah, really, that's so beautiful what you just said. That often our zone of greatness are the acquired skills that we learned as part of our personality or costume to get our needs met. And I'm appreciating, as you said, like type 5 for me, which was all about, um, the cognitive knowing and the like left brain prefrontal cortex. Like that's what I trust in terms of help, what is truth, not truth, rigorous, not rigorous, fluffy, what should be taken seriously, what should be discounted. And my journey has been about actually what is what is your personal experience with this? And is it useful to you right now as a person?
Mm,
Um, and the idea of the here I am teaching the Enneagram, which, as we've mentioned, has very little empirical validity in terms of the 9 types. It's resting on a lot of other um, foundational stuff around the nature of self and neuroscience in terms of how pathways, groove together. And so I would argue that there is a foundation in which the Enneagram is actually built a lot in terms of how we understand the brain to work and the self to originate. But at the same time, these 9 types, I mean, there isn't empirical validity to them. Yet I would argue that part of the reason why there's not empirical validity to them is because the types themselves are about looking at stories that lie underneath the surface that actually there's going to if we limit ourselves to those systems or those ways of being that are only empirically valid, there's so much richness and complexity and direct knowing of what it means to be a human being that we're
mhm.
not going to capture and experience.
Right, right. Well, and you just led us back to stories. You just led us back right to the story within us. So let's go to the stories that we all carry and why it's so important for us to look at our story.
Mm. Yeah. So one of the big things that's distinctive about the way that I teach the Enneagram, that is also a thread that shows up in the workbook with Elise, is, and I'll say both, depending on what your point of entry is to um, this podcast session. Um, as I said, Enneagram is 9 different types or personalities. One of the ways that I think that I'm quite adamant about teaching the 9 types is it's not just your observable traits. Are you extroverted or introverted? Are you conscientious or sloppy? More structured or spontaneous? That is part of what makes personality. But I'm going to argue that what creates the 9 types are what are the underlying stories you have about the way the world works and how you need to show up in terms of getting your needs met. And that actually is what drives type and actually is the foundation that leads observable traits to arise. And so while the facts of our lives are often like relative, like, you sort of think about someone like writing an obituary or writing, what was the story of this person's life? Like if you read a biography, very little of it is actually the fact, like the nuts and bolts of what actually happened to this person. Really where the juice is how did they make meaning of it? How did they take what happened to them and understand how to respond to it? Or how were they wounded by it? How did they leave it behind or did they carry it forward with them? Those are all stories. And it's the stories that end up both creating the richness of a life, but also end up being assumptions that we carry forward with us that we don't really know that we're carrying.
And we think of them as facts often, right? Like we think of our story as actually a fact when it's you're leading and teaching people to question that story.
Yes. Yeah. And so the definition I provide in the workbook, which I learned from Conscious Leadership Group, is facts are recordable events and stories are everything else. And when you use that level of filter to differentiate between fact and story, 99% of life is story. Like gender, like is a story.
Hmm.
Like the association of certain traits with being feminine or masculine, that's a story, actually.
Right. Um, you having light hair and me having darker hair, that's a fact, right? I would say that's a fact.
Yeah.
But what we say that actually means, depending on what culture we happen to be in, is a complete story.
Right. Right. And um, you know, like my hair is not short, my hair is long. Like it touches my shoulders. That's a fact. You might make up the story that that makes me feminine, right? Where there are plenty of cultures where men have long hair and they make up the opposite story.
Hmm.
And so again, like how we interpret and make meaning of something that's very short,
Hmm.
that's actually that's where the richness of being a human being lies, but it's also where our suffering lies more often than not. Um,
And you, I mean, you do a lot of this work individually. I know you do it in groups too. And again, I guess I'll speak to the duality of these realizations for people, which are the freeing of, oh my, I have been looking at this way this whole time, and I have another option. And then the uncertainty of, well, what does this mean for me if I look at it different on the way to empowerment?
yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. When I work one on one with clients, but I also run workshops and small women's groups. And when I teach fact versus story, I do set up an exercise where we work in pairs and um, we say back and forth, like, tell me a fact about yourself. And then the next question is, tell me a story you make up about that fact. And I'm quite particular that you need to say the story I'm making up about that fact is dot, dot, dot. And more often than not, what happens when we do this exercise is, first of all, we hear how crazy often the leap of thinking is from the fact to the story. So, over here, the very first time that I did a similar exercise to this, it was like 15 years ago. The tell me a fact about yourself. The fact is, my parents are divorced. Courtney, tell me a story you make up about that fact. The story is, I come from a screwed up family. And I heard those words come out of my mouth, and I was like, whoa, that's a leap. Like, who told you that?
Hmm.
And what has happened because you've believed that story? And so once I kind of saw for myself in that one little fact, oh gosh, like you you made a huge assumption and you've been going around for your whole life not questioning that assumption. Um,
Right, about identity, right? Like part of your identity to that point, our multifaceted identities, is I came from a screwed up family.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so you can see in exactly what you just said there that part of the reason, and this is where the work of the workbook lies, and also why I have a job where it's not just like I get the client to say the story and then they go, oh, and now I'm fine. Because as you say, identity is often built up in story. And so we can actually live our lives by stories that don't serve us, but we're reluctant to give them up because we'd have to re-question who we are. And that's really scary for us. And so there's other things that we need to do to support that. Well, who would I be without this story? And am I willing to be that?
Right. That there's back to the uncertainty and something we have not yet hit yet, but which is also so much a part of the work, is the fear,
Mm,
right? The fear
mm.
that keeps us in our story, the fear of changing our story, but also how facing it, recognize it, and moving through it, can come out on the other side.
Yeah, and part of the reason why I ended up writing the workbook with Elise is she got, her book on our best behavior was really it was naming the stories that women have inherited about gender, about what it means to be a good woman. And the feedback she got was, now that I see this, what do I do about it?
Hmm.
And for me, one big contribution that the workbook makes to that ongoing inquiry is to help people understand that the reason these stories stick around way past their expiration date is because we'd have to face a fear if we give them up. And what is that fear? And would we be willing to experience and live that? Fear of being abandoned by our partner, fear that other women might not like us, fear that something might happen to our children. All of these fears, these stories that are kind of outdated, they're riding on the back of a fear that we're not willing to face. And once we get to the fear, then that's where the action really is.
Hmm. Naming the fear, and I think from all of my work over the years in anxiety and fear, is it's hard. We kind of settle with most people settle with the feeling of this feels terrible and awful without having like maybe the tools or the support to pull back the curtain to say what is behind that feeling, what is that belief that is behind this fear feeling. And then similarly, like you're saying with the fact versus the story, when people say it, it's sometimes even surprising to them what the actual fear is that has had such a significant impact on their lives.
Yeah, and just to give some life to that, and please, let me know if I'm overspeaking, but like as a helper, like type 2 helper, I'm guessing some of your stories are, like if I were to really take care of myself, that would be selfish.
Hmm.
And if I were to be as like a selfish person,
Hmm.
um, you know, that makes me unlovable.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm scared I'm going to lose the approval or love of others.
Hmm.
And also, like, I don't even know if I'll love myself
Right.
because of the conditioning that the two sort of they internalize that message.
Yes.
And so, part of a type two's work, and every type has their equivalent. And now we're moving into the Enneagram space versus the gender space. But the type two work is about sort of looking at actually in what ways um, might I be more lovable the more I take care of myself?
Right. That's the challenge. And I had mentioned on a previous show where we were talking about the Enneagram. When I first saw my two, I was pissed, right? As some of us are I was like, I'm a freaking two. Like, I am, like, sure, I'm a psychologist, and sure, I've spent my whole life before that helping people, always, everywhere, in every single part of my life. But that's what I am. It takes a while to pull it apart to really get to it, and I think back to fear, the fear of of feeling like this is what defines you. These things that you mentioned, for example, for my type, that's what defines me. That's what I hold on to. That's what I'm afraid to let go of. And then when you start to peel apart the different crises or burnout or resentment or frustrations, those are actually the parts of my experience, the parts of you that are needing to move beyond this role and these beliefs that you have pointed out.
Yeah. I mean, and what I hear and what you just described, and every type has their equivalent. But for type two, the helper, often a big part of the you know bumping up against the system of the Enneagram is for a type two to understand that how much of your warm-heartedness and generosity has actually been, which is authentic and real, and at the same time has also been about a need inside yourself to feel loved.
Mhm.
And when a type 2 gets hit with that, it usually is like, "Bleh,
Yeah.
I don't like that feeling at all. Like, I don't are you telling
Yuck.
me that this has been self-interested all along? I don't."
No, I'm doing this for you, not for
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a very like, what I hear a little bit in your story is very much that reckoning
Yeah.
that many, and I promise every type has its equivalent, so
Yes.
it's just this is your flavor of having to look at, "Oh my god, this is what I've been up to."
Mhm.
And I I thought it was pretty, but it turns out it's
Yeah.
not so pretty.
Not as shiny. It's not as shiny as
No,
yeah.
no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then actually, if you get through that and you're willing to sort of say, actually, the truth is there are parts of me that are not so shiny.
Mhm.
And what would it be like actually to trust that I'm lovable anyway?
Right. Right.
And that's what the gift of resentment, the gift of depletion, the gift of overworking for the two is to actually, what would it be like to go into those feelings, not from a place of blame, but from a genuine place of actually the ugliness that's bubbling up in me
Mhm.
is actually something I need to bring out more in a healthier way because it is my salvation to returning to wholeness.
Yes, back to wholeness.
Yeah.
Did you talked a little bit about, your relationship with your 6 as being a loyal, skeptic. Did you have an ick moment, as you dug in about something that you thought was pretty shiny and cool too?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how there can be a different overlap between the 6 and the 2, but mine was about, being loyal to family and being loyal to my children and being loyal to my husband. And, a little bit like once I signed up for this role of being a wife and a mother, I take it really seriously and I'm fully committed to it. And then my path was learning that when I defined responsibility and commitment and duty so strongly like that and ignored parts of myself that wanted to do other things, what happened is that I became resentful and I became dysregulated and I became stressed out and I became unpleasant. And so then I had to look at all of the ways I was letting the people down who I had pledged loyalty to, right? And that the pledge of I will take this responsibility so seriously that I will deliver at the highest possible level was actually counterproductive
Mhm.
and I was shooting myself and the things that I claimed to care about so strongly in the foot.
Mhm. We are complex beings, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah. And wow, so interesting. Like you're telling me that the more like one of the to-dos that came out, like the ahas that came out of that is you're telling me, I'm learning from this system and I'm learning from my work that the more that I listen to what I do and not don't want to do inside myself and really trust that, you're telling me the better a parent I'm going to be. Whoa. And I I didn't believe that.
Mhm.
And I experimented in many small ways for many years
Mhm.
and ended up getting a lot of feedback that it was true.
Mhm. Mhm.
That the more I'm on purpose, the more alive, the more turned on I am over here in terms of what I'm doing in the broader sense, the better a parent I am, actually.
So, so true. Um, I just did a talk to a local group called Conscious and Courageous Parenting in Complex Times, and that was one of the core messages. Was it's literally about you and your awareness and you trusting yourself and not listening to the noise and to the programming and the worry about what you're supposed to be doing and what your kid is supposed to be doing, and go within. I mean, I'm giving a really like quick speech here, but it's so aligned and so true. And that is this journey that you help people on. And that is the journey of the workbook, is taking all this apart, really to come back to self, or to discover self, um, outside of all the layers and all the packaging and all the muck that we get as we go through life. And that first step is just being aware that it even exists. Like there actually is, like, we are someone beyond, outside of, or within all of this programming and stories.
Mhm.
And then, as one of your first tools is to look at these unconsciously held stories, to bring them to bear. Um, I like to think in my narrative therapy training back in the day, like externalizing the story, um, and then looking at, as you talked about, the fear, like what's keeping us there, what's keeping us stuck there, and it's usually fear. And how do we then, I'm bouncing it around a little bit, but I loved, you talked about the parts. And there's so much great, like so many different wonderful schools of thought that have woven together. And, the personas and internal family systems work about, is Katie, this is where Katie Hendricks is saying, like, what is it? Don't play, play the parts, or the parts are going to play you, something
Yeah.
like that. Right. So,
Yeah.
um, allowing ourselves to look at our different parts, and the ones that we might not like so much. Some call it the shadow, right? Like all of our parts, our young parts, our old parts, our wise parts, and know that they're all in there, so we know who's talking to us and whose stories we're living through in these any particular moment.
Yeah, and I mean, Katie Hendricks is such a pioneer, in her persona work, and then, it's like a tool that she developed on her own, and then a lot of the, theory of internal family systems developed by Dick Schwartz, ends up sort of validating it, and so to me, that's when I hear a truth from multiple sources and multiple perspectives, like I get kind of a light bulb over here. Like this is pointing to some perennial wisdom or truth that's worth pursuing. And um the work, like the idea is like once I identify, I've got a story, it's not serving me. Here's the part of me that gets really scared if I think about abandoning this story and choosing something new. Okay, I can be with the part of myself that's scared. I can see her, I can feel her. God, it feels like a big leap to just like let go of her. What do I do about that? And the persona work, which is about naming her or him, um, is inherently, let's inject some fun and play into this growth work. Because the truth is, as mammals, we do have neurological programming that we are designed to play. We don't have to teach babies how to play. They come programmed and wired to want to play, and no one really knows. People have all kinds of theories about why that is. But over here, part of it is because we learn through playing, and we actually also don't play unless we feel safe. And so here we are talking about fear. Here we are talking about stepping into the unfamiliar and learning and growing. And we're feeling some trepidation about it. And so part of the reason why the persona tool, even though it sounds kind of like this is crazy and silly, part of its power is because in the moment, it is communicating, hey, you're safe. It's safe to play around here. And hey, we're learning. And can we just make, rather than learning be serious and hard and feel like it has like really, you know, life or death consequences,
Hmm.
can we just have some fun with it?
Yeah, you're not getting a
And
grade. You're not getting a grade.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and there's some magic to, rather than, you know, um, getting so frustrated that there's one over here, mean mommy, who, like when we're half hour past bedtime and she gets tired and like still everyone's scurrying around in the kitchen and she can see that there's a bunch of stuff to do and she starts getting snippy and snapping her fingers, rather than feeling ashamed, and not able to work with that part of myself, what if I just call her mean mommy and acknowledge that she shows up sometimes?
Mm-hmm.
And my kids know what she looks like. I know what she looks like. And can we have a pact that if she starts to come online unintentionally, we can name her, and then I'm gonna like either drop her or I'm gonna go even more into it.
Yeah,
And then I'm gonna
that's
say like,
right.
mean
Me
mommy is
mommy is
here.
here.
Yeah, mean mommy is here and she means business.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, like let's get up those stairs pronto. And now the whole dynamic has shifted
Mm-hmm.
in real time.
Well, and that's choice. So that is choice. That's awareness and choice, because now you've identified that there's mean mommy as one of your parts. And when you realize mean mommy is here, as you said, you're either going to maybe drop it and go back to whomever you were right before, or a different part, or you're like, no, I know I'm mean mommy and I'm just going with it. And so that's that level of awareness that gives us that space to choose, as
Right.
opposed to just react.
Right. Exactly. Um, yeah, I mean, I've got some really adorable parts over here.
Oh, we all do. We all do. There's a concept, one of the concepts that I really like, that I want to tell a quick. So I'll say the concept. And I have to tell you a quick story that happened this morning. Well, let me start with this. So it's no surprise that well, you work with high profile people, and there's one high profile person who talks a lot about how you've changed her life, Brene Brown, who's someone who work I love, and listen to. And so your concept of above the line and below the line. So that's where I'm moving to, but I want to tell a story that happened this morning. So I was talking to a colleague about coaching a client, a team situation that I'm involved in. And she sent me Brene Brown and Adam Grant's the recent podcast that they've been doing on her book Strong Ground, which I just started reading. So she wanted me to hear this concept. She thought it'd be relevant to the thing that I talked to her about. So I took it on my run. I'm listening to it, and it was very relevant. And then I finished it. I had like 10 more minutes on my run, and I saw there was all these other things on the feed from Brene Brown, and I saw, oh, Strong Ground, the new book. There's these two people who are doing a 16-minute summary, and they're reading parts of the book. And so I'm like, I've got that time. I'll speed it up. So Brene has said how much you have changed her life. And then in the book, they talked about this great concept called above the line, below the line. And I'm like, wait a second. Like this is another way that she is showing and that the impact that you have had. So talk about I love the idea of above the line and below the line, and how that alone can orient us right away to determining, like, what story are we telling ourselves, and how are we going to step into this or not?
Yeah, so above below the line is, and of course, yeah, I really like Brene is such a blast to work with, and I really appreciate that she's been coming forward with speaking about the impact that I've had, and really the power of these tools. Um, Above and below the line is really just a shorthand for what we've been speaking about here, which is below the line is when fear is in the driver's seat. And what happens when fear is running us is fear is such an unpleasant physical experience that we will do anything to make it go away. And in fact, that's what fear is designed to do.
Hmm.
Fear is designed to be so uncomfortable that it becomes our number one priority because that's what kept us alive, right? And so, but the deal is that when fear arises in our body and it becomes the number one priority, it's like safety, safety, safety. The way I show up in this world then is about that orienting myself to feeling safe as opposed to what's above the line, which is orienting myself to what I want, to who I really am, and to like what my values are. And so as human beings, we are evolutionarily predisposed to feel scared all the time. It's adaptive, right? The more scared you feel and the more you respond to fear, you may not like your life you're living, but you are going to be alive. And so we really have evolved to have a hair trigger response to be scared in all sorts of circumstances.
Especially with the added media that is coming on top. It just greases the track, right? Yeah.
Right. Right. And in fact, like as you were talking about the conversation you led around parenting courageously, like what came to my mind is what you're really talking about is all the ways that we are set up to parent from fear
Yes.
as opposed to something else. What and above the line is about if we actually deeply relaxed into trusting that all is well and I still am going to move forward and I'm still going to make choices. Now, what guides those choices? And all of a sudden, I get access to connection, creativity, learning, integrity, love
Hmm.
and play. And so the shorthand of am I above or below the line is really because um, as grown-ups, I would argue that we're being driven by fear most of the time, but we've been taught to be really sophisticated about it and pretend that's not what's happening. And so we do things like we analyze or we fix or we help or we listen and we get rewarded for those activities. But more often than not, those activities are arising out of a fear of something needs to, like, all is not well here.
Hmm.
And so above and below the line is um, language that adults can use to help label, "Hey, I'm actually really scared over here, and fear is driving me."
Hmm. I'm below the line.
And below the line, I'm below the line. I'm
Hmm.
below the line. And above the line is not about I'm not scared. Above the line is about actually I'm scared, but I'm choosing to not let that be
Hmm.
what's guiding me.
Yes. Yes. I also like how this dovetails with, we know that different emotions have different energy. It can actually be tracked. And high energy love, low energy fear and hate. And so when I think about, in short speak, above the line love, below the line hate, above the line compassion, below the line fear, right? It's like not to make too much these polarities, but we can. And I think sometimes it's helpful to simplify the complexities that we have, to think about, where am I right now? So I know for myself, it's in my chest. Like when I feel that in my chest, I'm below the line. I'm in fear, right? And as you said, I can still be fearful or nervous or anxious, but I can consciously start to focus on love, compassion, possibility, wonder, awe at the same time. And we find that our physiological state starts to change when we start to change where we are. And as you say, um, it's the difference between saying this is happening to me versus this is happening for me.
Mhm. Yeah. And the to me for me is a great distinction because, most of us think about fear as like, oh, we're like on an airplane and it's, starting to like there's, you know, congestion, like it's I'm gonna die because it's starting to do weird things. And so we have this traditional definition of fear arises only in times of like really life or death. And what I want to argue and what I have learned inside myself and also with my clients is fear arises anytime I outsource my fundamental sense of well being to something outside me. Because now, in order for me to feel okay over here, the external circumstances have to look a certain way. And that's what to me is about. To me is about I'm scared that I won't be okay unless the world looks this way, unless I'm in control, unless you love me, unless I have, this certain level of safety or stability. The world happening for me and by me is about, which is the another way of describing above the line, um, is about I cannot control what is happening outside me, but what I can control is how I make meaning of it.
Yes.
And so if I understand that what's happening outside of me, there's a way I can relate to it as I may not like it. It may have certain consequences, but it doesn't mean I'm not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. As the Dalai Lama says, we can be okay even when our life circumstance is not okay.
Right. And that's really the ultimate power. Like that's kind of the boss move
Yeah.
is to say, I'm the one that decides if I'm okay.
Hmm. Yes. I think so much more to go. And I also know we have to wind down. And I like that message. That's a strong message of I'm the one that gets to decide if I'm okay. And this goes back to the beginning when you said internal resonance. Like if we can try to calibrate within, if we can go within, if we can be aware of the stories that are around us, the stories that are within us, deconstruct them, look at them. You talk about being curious about them, and we can transform them. And that's what you do day in and day out with your work is help people transform their stories, which ultimately helps individuals transform themselves in small micro ways over time. And this is for everyone for the hope that it's so possible. The workbook has all of the steps. It has the tools, and stuff works.
Hmm. Thank you. Yeah, obviously I wouldn't be doing my what I do if I didn't believe that. And you know, I've got things I'm working on just like the rest of us every day. Um, and I love my life so much more, having been on this journey and started working with these tools myself,
Hmm.
so many years ago. And um, it's because of that that I do what I do.
And it's clear how you embody them. You embody them, and as we know, with strong leadership, whether that's leadership in the home or leadership in the community or leadership at work, embodying the values that you are wanting to teach is the ultimate way um, to teach and to live.
Thank you. Well, I feel you doing that on the podcast here now also. So I have a lot of gratitude and appreciation for you as well.
Thank,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Tell everyone about the book, where they can find you, and anything else that you're up to that we should know about.
Okay, thank you. So the name of the book is called Choosing Wholeness Over Goodness, a process for reclaiming yourself. It is by Elise Loehnen and Courtney Smith, and you can get it on Amazon or hopefully in your local bookstore. Um, I am not on social media
Which I
intentionally.
respect. Which I respect.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. But you can find my website, CourtneySmithConsulting.com. And that's where I list upcoming events and workshops, and I'll be doing more of those in 2026. And then I also do have a Substack called What We're Really Up To, where I do give myself permission to write and explore in real time what's lighting me up, and would love for you to check it out if that lights you up as well.
We're going to check it out. Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you.
Courtney simply loves the work that she does and is an example of what it looks like to live in purpose. Here are 5 key takeaways from this conversation. Number 1, we all live inside stories, most of which we never consciously choose. The power begins when we distinguish facts from the narratives we've created around them. Number 2, fear is the quiet driver beneath so many of our behaviors. Recognizing when we're below the line gives us the possibility to choose differently. Number 3, personality patterns aren't cages. They're invitations to understand what once kept us safe but no longer serves us. Number 4, transformation requires uncertainty. Stepping into the unknown is uncomfortable, but it's where internal resonance and genius begins to emerge. Number 5, wholeness is possible. When we integrate our parts, light and shadow, we move closer to authenticity, presence, and the freedom to author our own lives. Take these in, people. Wisdom for us, questions to ask, awareness to be had, and courage to keep digging and digging as we continue to grow and expand. Thank you for listening. Please share this with anyone you think will benefit. Thank you for being a part of our community, for subscribing, for your 5-star reviews. Remember, we have a new growth path quiz. It's free, it's short, and it will tell you your growth type, your strengths, your challenges, your growth edge, and give you resources to help you along your growth journey. We have this moment, this day, and this life. Let's make it a great one. This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Make It a Great One with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Uplifting Folk by Awesome Music. Artwork by Kelly Dwyer. Follow us on social media at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, visit drdanpeters.com.